2022 was a tough year for the world we've been living in, as heat waves killed thousands of people and triggered forest fires in many countries. And amid such concerning and serious threats of climate change issues, natural disasters such as flash floods have hit parts of Pakistan, Lebanon and Australia towards the end of the year. In the meantime, in desert countries such as Saudi Arabia, they experienced massive floods in November this year. 2022 also saw such new surprising turns of events in politics, as new leaders are making their way to the top in several countries and some former presidents were making triumphant return to the top. How have all of these events unfolded throughout 2022? So in the next 60 minutes, we will be inviting you to see in flashback all of these significant events making headlines around the world throughout 2022, wrapped up by our editorial team of TVRI World. I'm Rahmat Idris. This is 2022 in Review, International Highlights. A couple survived the storm which tore through Round Rock, Texas, a city of around 120,000 people, about 20 miles or 32 kilometers away from Austin. One of the survivors, Lauren, said they hid in the bathtub because the plumbing went down deep. Police said buildings in and around the city had suffered extreme structural damage, but only minor injuries had been reported. Heavy rain battered parts of the Iberian Peninsula on December the 13th, with authorities were forced to suspend bus and tram services and close some main roads. The Lisbon mayor's office put the city on a red weather warning and urged people to stay home and avoid commuting to the capital in the estuary of the Tagus River. Schools in the municipality of Oeiras, part of the Lisbon district, have shut and students were sent home. Neighboring Spain was also hit, with the central western region of Extremadura put on the second highest level of emergency. Heavy rain caused a road to collapse and a group of 10 people had to be rescued. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis reported that strong winds, high waves and storm surge caused catastrophic damage across areas of Florida's southwestern Gulf Coast. The National Hurricane Center recorded severe and life-threatening storm surge inundation of 1.4 to 3 meters. Videos and images on social media showed thousands of buildings were flooded in some areas, such as Fort Myers, Naples, and Port Charlotte on the 27th of September 2022. On November the 29th, heavy rainfall hit Lebanon, causing floods in several areas. The video footage showed cars wading through a flooded area while being caught in traffic jams in Junia, a coastal city in the Kasserwan district. Lebanon also prepared for a hard winter and high economic and political crisis that is affecting the infrastructure and daily life. After heavy rains hit Saudi Arabia's second largest city, streets were flooded in Jeddah on November the 24, 2022. Eyewitness video showed vehicles stranded in knee-deep floodwaters. Local government said that 2 deaths had been reported in the floods and asked residents to remain at home unless necessary. Heavy rain smashed parts of southwest New South Wales and northeast Victoria over the weekend, with Cowra town about 300 kilometers west of Sydney, receiving 120 millimeters over 24 hours, the highest rainfall in 118 years, data showed. Vast amounts of water were seen gushing out of the Ryangala Dam on November the 14th, 2022. In the central west region of New South Wales, after record rainfall hit parts of Australia over the weekend. More than a dozen helicopters were deployed by emergency crews to rescue trapped people from rooftops in the state's worst-hit towns, with more than 200 flood rescue operations conducted.
Another factor, the Indian Ocean dive.
Over 20 wildfires raged
Chairman of the World Meteorology Organization's or WMO, Petri Thales, warned of the increasing trend of heat waves in some countries across the world until 2060, triggered by carbon emission. In the midst of 2022, carbon emission triggered heat waves in Western Europe, such as France, the United Kingdom and Switzerland, with the hottest temperature reaching 40.3 degrees Celsius. France braced for what could become one of the hottest days ever recorded, with temperatures reaching and even exceeding 40 degrees Celsius. Britain also braced for temperatures hitting 40 degrees Celsius for the first time, with ministers urging the public to stay at home as heat waves caused train services to be cancelled. Spain faced the week-long heat wave, which caused more than 510 heat-related deaths. According to local government data, there were 1,600 victims who died by heat wave at the Iberian Peninsula in Spain and in Portugal. In Germany, the Meteorology Organization also reported the hottest temperature in Western Germany and Hamburg between 39.5 and 40.1 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, in Denmark, the hottest temperature was recorded in Abed City with 35.9 degrees Celsius, which was the second hottest in Denmark throughout 2022.
Jeopardizing irrigation and worrying locals.
In September, firefighters struggled to contain a deadly blaze in Hemet, California. That spread to around 2,000 hectares overnight. The so-called Fairview fire started on Monday on September the 5th and spread rapidly, leaving at least 2 people dead. Aerial images showed large plumes of smoke rose above the affected area. Multiple wildfires were seen burning across Idaho in September, created massive clouds of smoke in footage filmed by local authorities. Ross Fork Fire was burning in Sawtooth National Forest, and according to local media, it has grown to affect around 24,000 acres. Reports indicated that the fires were being fanned by hot and dry winds. At least 98 people were killed after tropical storm Nalgae hit the Philippines on October the 29th, 2022 and caused landslides in southern provinces of the country. The tropical storm, which had maximum sustained winds of 95 kilometers per hour and gusts of up to 130 kilometers per hour, has made multiple landslides in the eastern Philippines. The Philippines sees an average of 20 tropical storms annually. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. ordered urgent aid distributions in hard-hit areas. The Philippine Weather Bureau said Nalgae was tracking westward toward the South China Sea, where it could re-intensify into a typhoon while heading toward southern China. We'll be back with more recap of international event highlights and occurrences of 2022. So stay with us right here, 2022 in Review, International Highlights. Welcome back. In this segment, we'll take a look at some of the most unfortunate events and incidents taking place around the world throughout 2022. The world is again shocked by the mass shooting incidents taking place across several states in the USA. Dozens of civilians, predominantly children, fell victims to the perpetrators' abominable actions. In the meantime, on the other side of the globe, in Lampung province in Thailand, 22 children fell victims and died due to a similar shooting incident in the country. Texas police reported on May the 24th, 2022 that the shooter at the Texas school that killed 21 students and 1 teacher had likely acted alone. Governor Greg Abbott said the gunman was identified as 18-year-old Salvador Ramos, who was apparently killed by police officers responding to the scene. Two of those officers were struck by gunfire, though the governor said their injuries were not serious. Family, friends and locals gathered on May the 27th at the Uvalde Town Square at a memorial for the victims of the Robb Elementary School shooting. The square across the street from the municipal courthouse has served as a site for mourning in the days following the shooting, where dozens have gathered to lay flowers, console one another, and write messages on symbolic crosses engraved with the names of the victims.
Devastation in Thailand.
A former policeman killed 34 people, including 23 children, during a knife and gun rampage on October the 6th, 2022, before shooting dead his wife and child at home and turning his weapon on himself. Thailand police reported the mass shooting as one of the world's worst child death tolls and a massacre by a single killer in recent history. Most of the fatalities were children at the daycare center in Uthai Sawan, a town 500 kilometers northeast of Bangkok. A local official said the age range of children at the daycare center was from 2 to 5 years old. Thai government buildings flew flags at half-mast on October the 7th to mourn the death of the victims. A deadly crash killed 156 people and injured another 198, mostly in their 20s and 30s, when revelers flooded narrow alleyways in the popular nightlife district of Itaewon, Seoul, on October the 29th, 2022. The incident took place at about 10:20 p.m. local time, as a large number of people fell down in a narrow alley during a Halloween celebration. South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol has called for a thorough investigation, and authorities said they were focused on reconstructing the lead-up to the crash, as well as looking at whether anyone may have been responsible for triggering the crash. The year 2022 still witnessed the continuing outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, albeit being in such smaller scales. New sub-variants of the virus continue to emerge as well, alongside robust efforts of global nations to live with the virus and in a new normal.
China is stepping up measures to control new...
According to the official website of the World Health Organization, the coronavirus variants are named according to the Greek alphabet, such as alpha, beta, and gamma, in order to make it easier to remember. 1. B117 alpha variant. The first positive case of the alpha B117 variant is likely to have happened in mid-September 2020 in London and Kent, England. By mid-December 2020, more than 1,100 cases of the alpha variant were detected in nearly 60 regions in England and also in Wales and Scotland. 2. B1351 beta variant. The beta variant was originally known as B1351 and first detected in South Africa in September 2020. This variant contains a number of mutations in a protein called spike, which can make the virus able to more firmly attach to human cells. 3. B1526 iota variant. Variant B1526 or iota was discovered in November 2020 when the sampling was done in New York, USA. 4. P1 gamma variant. Originated from Manaus, Brazil, the gamma P1 variant was first detected in Japan after a traveler arriving from Brazil was confirmed positive for COVID-19 in December 2020. This variant dominates the number of COVID-19 surge in Brazil. 5. B1525 EDA variant. B1525 variant was first reported in England on December the 15th, 2020. 5 days later, Nigeria reported the occurrence of the same variant. The ETA variant is detected in more than 20 countries. 6. P2 Zeta variant. Just like P1 or Gamma, the P2 variant or Zeta variant was also found in Brazil. This variant was also reportedly detected in England and has spread to Rio de Janeiro. This variant is not considered as a coronavirus variant of concern. 7. B.1.617.2 Delta variant. The emergence of coronavirus variant B.1.617.2 or Delta was first reported in India in December 2020. The Delta variant is caused by a mutated coronavirus. To date, Delta variant has been found in more than 74 countries. 8. B.1.617.1 Kappa variant. B.1.617.1 or Kappa variant is the second variant discovered in India in December 2020. It has been proven resistant to bamlanivimab antibodies used for COVID-19 treatment, and susceptibility to neutralizing antibodies produced by vaccines also decreased. 9. B.1.621 MU variant. The B.1.621 variant or DUI21JOL1 was first discovered in Colombia in January 2021. Patients affected by MU variant show the same symptoms as all other types of coronaviruses, such as fever, cough, loss or changes in the sense of taste or smell. 10. B.1.427 or B.1.429 Epsilon variant. This variant was first identified in California, USA in February 2021. It is considered easier and faster to spread. 11. P3 Theta variant. Variant P3 or Theta variant was first detected in the Philippines on March 13, 2021. It is allegedly more contagious than the original version of SARS-CoV-2. 12. B.1.1529 Omicron variant. Omicron was first detected in South Africa in November 2021. It is the only variant classified as a variant of concern by WHO and is still circulating today. Omicron has become the dominant variant circulating globally and causing more than 98% of cases since February 2022. There are 6 Omicron subvariants monitored by WHO, namely BA5, BA275, BJ1, BA46, XBB, and BA2320. Among international conflicts and politics in 2022, the 10th month-long war between Russia and Ukraine has been the most highlighted. Well, Russia first invaded Ukraine back on the 24th of February 2022. And since then, the war has continued to escalate, impacting not only the two conflicting nations, but also the global stability. And communities around the globe are continuing to hope for solutions and settlements for these two nations. In the meantime, ahead of the chairmanship for ASEAN in 2023, President of the Republic of Indonesia, Joko Widodo, visited a number of ASEAN partner countries, to name a few: China, South Korea, and Japan, in a bid to further strengthen multilateral cooperations. And here are the highlights. December marks 10 months since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine on February the 24th, 2022. Russia invades Ukraine from 3 fronts in the biggest assault on a European state since World War II. U.S. President Joe Biden hit Russia with a wave of sanctions on February the 24th, immediately after Moscow invaded Ukraine. Measures that impede Russia's ability to do business in major currencies, along with sanctions against banks and state-owned enterprises. Russia and Ukraine signed a landmark deal on July the 22 to unblock grain exports from Black Sea ports and ease an international food crisis, while the United States pledged more military support 5 months into the invasion. Russia and Ukraine carried out an unexpected prisoner swap on September the 21st, the largest since the war began, and involving almost 300 people, including 10 foreigners and the commanders who led a prolonged Ukrainian defense of Mariupol earlier this year. President Vladimir Putin on September the 21st ordered Russia's first mobilization since World War II and backed a plan to annex swaths of Ukraine, warning the West he was not bluffing, and he said he'd be ready to use nuclear weapons to defend Russia. More than 730 people were detained across Russia at protests against a mobilization order on September the 24th. Millions have left Ukraine since Russia's invasion, many finding accommodation in private homes or hotels, as well as in government-sponsored housing. Tens of thousands have died in the war, including at least 6,700 civilian deaths counted by the United Nations. Russia denies intentionally targeting civilians or committing atrocities on occupied territory. Global crude oil hit the lowest price in January 2022 at $73.6 per barrel. In March, China's COVID latest lockdowns have significantly changed the outlook for oil, which some experts had predicted could spike to $150 per barrel or more after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. OPEC Plus, which comprises the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, and allies, including Russia, agreed in October to cut its targeted output by 2 million barrels per day, or BPD, or about 2% of world demand, from November until the end of 2023. OPEC Plus said it cut the oil output because of a weaker economic outlook, but the move did not shore up prices. Analysts expect oil prices to increase next year. The government of Indonesia evacuated a total of 133 Indonesian citizens and 3 foreign nationals who are family members of the Indonesian citizens. 57 other Indonesians have opted to stay in Ukraine, 34 of which decided to stay for personal reasons, while the other 23 are the Indonesian embassy staff. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Retno Marsudi, said the evacuation process was challenging as the conflict was still underway. The evacuation was successfully completed thanks to the support of ministries, agencies from both Ukraine and Indonesia. Two people were killed in a missile explosion in the Polish village of Przewodów, about 6 kilometers away from the border of Ukraine, on November the 15th. President Volodymyr Zelensky denied claims by NATO that a Ukrainian missile had likely landed on Polish territory. Poland President Andrzej Duda said the country had no concrete evidence showing who fired the missile, and experts were working at the site to investigate the strike. NATO and its Western allies earlier said that evidence from the scene pointed to explosions being caused by a Ukrainian air defense missile that went astray in pursuit of a Russian missile. Kyiv denied this, saying it had evidence of a Russian trace in the blast. After attending the G7 summit in Germany, President Joko Widodo boarded on a train from Poland and arrived in Kiev, Ukraine in the morning of June 29, renewing his invitation for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to attend the G20 Leaders Summit in Bali. On the occasion, Joko Widodo offered to deliver a message from the Ukrainian president to Russian leader Vladimir Putin on an attempt to boost peace hopes between the two warring countries. By sending the peace message, Jokowi hopes of rekindling peace talks between Russia and Ukraine and exploring ways to free up exports of grain to global markets. Jokowi also visited the town of Irpin, which was destroyed by missile attacks from Russia the day before. Ukraine was one of Indonesia's biggest wheat suppliers, but Russia's sea blockade has halted Kyiv's Black Sea grain exports and threatening global food crisis. Jokowi met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow on June the 30th. Putin said requests for fertilizers from farmers in Indonesia and other friendly countries would be met in full by Russian providers. The Russian president also said that Russia intends to honor its contractual obligations regarding supplies of energy, food, and fertilizers abroad. On the occasion, Putin denied that Moscow was blocking Ukrainian grain exports and questioned the impact of missing Ukrainian agricultural goods on the world food market. President Joko Widodo made a short state visit to China, Japan, and South Korea from the 26th to the 28th of July 2022. The Indonesian president visited Beijing on the 26th of July, Tokyo on the following day, and Seoul on the 28th of July. Minister of Foreign Affairs Retno Marsudi said in a media statement that the three countries are Indonesia's strategic partners in economic sector as well as ASEAN strategic partners on regional issues. China was Indonesia's trade partner with a total transaction values amounting to $110 billion in 2021. In the same year, the country was the third major investor to Indonesia with investment value amounting to $3.2 billion. Second, Japan is Indonesia's strategic partner and economy with trade value amounting to $32 billion and investment value of $2.26 billion in 2021. And third, South Korea is also an important partner to Indonesia, considering the total trade value amounting to $18.41 billion and investment value of $1.64 billion in 2021. Twenty 2022 showed impressive momentum in efforts by the so-called Washington Consensus to target adverse Chinese practices. U.S. President Joe Biden administration offered a chance to change the course of U.S.-China relations, which had hit a low point under the outgoing Trump administration. The Foreign Ministry of China on August the 5th announced it has cancelled and suspended 8 talks in areas of cooperation with the China-U.S. talks, among other China-U.S. defense policy coordination talks. The announcement came shortly after a decision on the same day to sanction Nancy Pelosi and her immediate family members. Meantime, the U.S. Department of Commerce has implemented sweeping new export controls that will require companies to receive a license to export U.S.-made advanced computing and semiconductor products to China. According to a release issued by the Bureau of Industry and Security, the purpose of the export controls is to protect U.S. national security and foreign policy interests. Despite the trade dynamics of both countries had applied in 2022, the value of Chinese goods purchased by the U.S. is higher than it's ever been. According to the United States Census Bureau, in the first 9 months of the year, the U.S. imported $418 billion in goods from China, or $23.7 billion more than it did in the same period of 2018. Meantime, on March 18th, President Xi and President Biden spoke on a conference call, the first direct communication between the two leaders since their virtual summit in November 2021 and the first talk since the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war. President Biden and President Xi held a 2-hour call on July the 28th, in which they discussed cooperation between the two countries and issues surrounding Taiwan and Ukraine, among other matters. The call was the first direct contact between the leaders since their last call on March the 18th. Meanwhile, Biden-Xi meeting in Bali, Indonesia on November the 15th has established red lines to avoid potential conflicts between China and the United States. It is a significant step towards stabilizing the most important bilateral relationships of the two countries. Iranians went on strike in several cities in Iran on November the 15th to commemorate the 2019 protests over fuel prices, a display of dissent that was crushed by security forces in one of the bloodiest crackdowns in the history of the Islamic Republic. People gathered at the Azad University Khomeini Shah branch chanting slogans as part of the protest. These moves added to pressure on Iran's clerical rulers who have been battling 2 months of nationwide protests triggered by the death of 22-year-old Kurdish woman Mahsa Amini and the custody of the morality police. In 2019, 1,500 people were killed in a wave of unrest which began over fuel price hikes but quickly turned political. Has conducted a record number of ballistic missile tests, which are banned by the United Nations Security Council resolutions that have sanctioned the country over its missile and Approaching the end of the year, a number of state leaders summits are held around the globe. These leaders gather to address some of the key priorities issues around the world. The summits are largely expected to find common grounds and solutions to the world's problems, which includes economic recessions, climate change, and also the impacts of prolonged war. The 27th session of the Conference of the Parties of COP27 of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or UNFCCC, was held in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt on November 6 to 20, 2022. The meeting conclusion was delayed for about 40 hours before the negotiating countries finally came to a comprehensive agreement in the early morning of Sunday, November the 21st, 2022. One of the highlights of the Climate Change Conference is that the participating negotiators agreed to establish Loss and Damage Fund, a dedicated fund for vulnerable countries in the Global South, with a transitional committee to start work in 2023. A loss and damage fund is to be set up by developed states and international financial institutions to pay for the hazardous effects of climate change on poorer nations that have been much less responsible for causing global warming. The 40th and 41st summits of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, came to an end on November 13, 2022, with Cambodia handing over the chairmanship of the regional grouping to Indonesia. Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen was seen handing over a hammer symbolizing the ASEAN chairmanship to Indonesian President Joko Widodo. The 2023 Indonesian chairmanship of ASEAN will adopt the theme ASEAN Matters, Epicentrum of Growth. During the Cambodian summit, the regional grouping had agreed in principle to admit East Timor as the group's 11th member. World leaders from 21 member Asia-Pacific countries, including Chinese President Xi Jinping, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, attended the APEC summit on November the 18th, 2022. Thailand, the host of the APEC summit, urged leaders in Bangkok to rise above differences and focus on resolving pressing global economic issues in areas such as trade and inflation. The summit was overshadowed by a nuclear-capable ballistic missile test suspected by North Korea. As the missile fell in Japanese waters, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris immediately called for an impromptu meeting of allied APEC members. Apart from the substance and the nuclear missile test, about 350 protesters gathered and clashed with police about 10 kilometers away from the summit venue, protesting against the APEC summit and the leadership of Thai Prime Minister Prayuth Chan-o-cha. Prime Minister Prayuth Chan-o-cha handed over the ceremonial APEC Shalom to U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, as the United States will host the summit in San Francisco next year. Indonesia hosted the summit of the world's 20 largest economies, or G20, in Bali on November the 15th to the 16th, 2022. As the 2022 chair of G20, Indonesia has set global health architecture, digital transformation, and sustainable energy transition under the theme Recover Together, Recover Stronger as the three priority issues during its one-year presidency. Head of states from 16 member countries and the European Union attended the summit, while presidents of Russia, Mexico, and Brazil were absent from this year's meeting. Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen, who was invited in his capacity as the 2022 chair of ASEAN, unfortunately tested positive for COVID-19 and had to fly back home before the summit began. Bilateral meeting between U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping was the highlight of the G20 summit, as it was their first face-to-face meeting since Biden rose to presidency in January 2021. Also highlight of the summit was the gathering of G7 leaders in Bali for an emergency meeting on November the 16th after missile explosions in Poland. Biden later said a missile attack had not been fired from Russia. The G7 leaders' emergency meeting effective delayed the G20 leaders' visit to the mangrove forest. After about an hour delay, President Joko Widodo invited the G20 leaders to plant mangrove trees at the Grand Forest Park. President Joko Widodo told the media conference on the last day of the summit that the war in Ukraine was the most debated topic among the G20 leaders. G20 leaders issued a joint declaration at the end of the summit deploring in the strongest terms Russia's aggression against Ukraine. On the same day, President Joko Widodo officially handed over the G20 presidency to India. Well, the year 2022 is undoubtedly a political year for a number of countries in the world. Brazil, Chile, South Korea, the Philippines, and even Malaysia welcome new presidents and new prime ministers as a result of their general elections in their respective countries. In the meantime, an unprecedented power transfer took place in the United Kingdom as the country saw 3 different prime ministers in the span of 4 months.
Yoon Suk-yeol of the opposition Conservative People Power Party won the South Korean presidential election on March the 9th. He edged out rival Lee Jae-myung from the governing Democratic Party by securing 48.56% of votes against Lee's 47.83%. Sim Jang-jung of the Justice Party got 2.37%. The election boiled down to a two-way showdown between Yoon and Lee. They spent months slamming, mocking, and demonizing each other in one of the most bitter political campaigns in recent memory. Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. has been sworn in as President of the Philippines, undoing the legacy of a democratic revolt that ousted his dictator father from office in 1986. Congress declared Marcos Jr. the presidential poll winner on Wednesday, the 25th of May 2022, after he amassed more than 31 million votes in the official tally. His running mate, Sara Duterte Carpio, daughter of outgoing autocrat Rodrigo Duterte, was proclaimed vice president with some 32 million votes. Marcos Jr.'s inauguration marks the culmination of a decades-long struggle by the Marcoses to reclaim their political glory. Marcos Sr.'s rule ended in 1986 when a mass uprising saw millions of people take to the streets, and the Marcos family, including a 28-year-old Bongbong, fled the country for Hawaii.
Malaysia's
Anwar Ibrahim has been sworn in as the Prime Minister of Malaysia after his progressive coalition edged rival former Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin's mostly conservative ethnic Malay Muslim alliance in the November 19, 2022 elections. The 75-year-old Anwar has time and again been denied the premiership despite getting within striking distance a number of times over the years. He was Deputy Prime Minister in the 1990s and the official Prime Minister in waiting in 2018. With 82 parliamentary seats, Anwar's Pakatan Harapan, or Alliance of Hope, came out on top in the elections, but was short of the 112 seats needed for a majority. Muhyiddin's Perikatan Nasional, or National Alliance, won 73 seats. With the support of all 30 lawmakers in the United Malays National Organizations, or UMNO alliance, Anwar was able to secure a majority. He is the fourth Prime Minister in as many years. Boris Johnson announced on July 7, 2022 that he would quit as British Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, as he dramatically lost the support of his ministers and most conservative lawmakers after more than 3 years in office. His term was ended by scandals that included breaches of COVID-19 pandemic lockdown rules, a luxury renovation of his official residence, and the appointment of a minister who had been accused of sexual misconduct. Liz Truss served as Prime Minister and the leader of the Conservative Party from September to October 2022. On her 50th day in office, she stepped down amid a government crisis, making her the shortest-serving Prime Minister in the UK history. Truss defeated Rishi Sunak in the Conservative Party leadership election to succeed Johnson, and was appointed Prime Minister by Queen Elizabeth II 2 days before the monarch's death. Facing mounting criticism and loss of confidence in her leadership, Truss announced her resignation as leader of the Conservative Party on October the 25th. Rishi Sunak stood in the July-September Conservative Party leadership election to succeed Johnson, but lost the members' vote to Foreign Secretary Liz Truss. After spending the duration of Truss's premiership on the backbenches, Sunak stood in the October 2022 Conservative Party leadership election to succeed Truss, who resigned amid another government crisis. Sunak is the first British Asian and Hindu to hold the office of UK Prime Minister.
Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva won Brazil's presidential election on the 30th of October 2022 by a whisker. He secured 50.9% of the vote compared with 49.1% for rival Jair Bolsonaro. The election was Brazil's most polarizing poll since its return to democracy in 1985. The vote also marked the first time that the sitting president failed to win re-election. Lula is credited with building an extensive social welfare program during his previous 2 terms in office, 2002 to 2010, helping lift tens of millions into the middle class, as well as presiding over an economic boom. He left office with an 83% approval rating, but he is also remembered for his administration's corruption involvement revealed by sprawling investigations. The Nobel Prize winner José Ramos Horta scored a landslide victory in Timor-Leste's presidential election, securing 397,145 votes, or 62.09%, against incumbent Francisco Luolo Guterres with 242,440, or 37.91%. The victory gives Ramos Horta his second term in office. He served as president of Timor-Leste from 2007 to 2012. Ramos Horta said he came out of retirement to run once more, as he believed the outgoing president had violated the constitution. He benefited from the backing of Xanana Gusmão, the country's first president, who has frequently been a kingmaker in Timor-Leste.
Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the United Arab Emirates' long-ailing ruler and president, died on Friday, the 13th of May 2022, at the age of 73. He was inaugurated as the president of the UAE, the second one in 2004. And to honor his passing, the government suspended all activities across ministries, departments, and also federal and local institutions, as well as private sectors, for 3 days.
As an expression of deep condolences, flags were flown and half-mast, and residents expressed their sorrow following the death of United Arab Emirates President Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan at the age of 73 on May the 13th. People performed a funeral prayer in absentia at Dubai's Jumeirah Mosque following the news of his passing. His half-brother Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan is now in charge of state affairs. Khalifa, who was born in 1948, had been the ruler of the richest emirate, Abu Dhabi, and UAE president since the death of his father, Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, in 2004. He, however, had rarely been seen in public since suffering from a stroke in 2014. Since then, he had continued to hold ceremonial powers that had allowed his half-brother, Abu Dhabi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed, to hold the true reins of power. Japan's ex-Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was pronounced dead around 5.5 hours on July the 8th after being shot from behind with a homemade firearm as he was making a campaign speech outside a train station in Nara, Japan. According to local police, the shooter was a 41-year-old unemployed Nara resident who said he bore a grudge against a specific organization and believed Abe was part of it. It was the first assassination of a sitting or former Japanese premier since the days of pre-war militarism in the 1930s. A steady stream of mourners on July the 9th visited the scene of the bloody assassination of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in the western city of Nara, an unusual act of political violence that has shocked the nation.
Party controlling its major factions.
In August this year, the last Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, died at the age of 92. He was the last president of the Soviet Union and died after suffering from such long illnesses. In the meantime, 3 months later, former Chinese President Jiang Zemin also passed away at the age of 96 after suffering from leukemia and organ failures. He was the Chinese president from 1993 to 2003. Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the last Soviet leader, died at the age of 91 on September the 22nd, 2022. Gorbachev, the Soviet leader who was much admired in the West and who lived long enough to see all the reforms he had championed undone, was buried without state honors or the presence of President Vladimir Putin. Hundreds of Russians filed into Moscow's historic Hall of Columns on September the 3rd to bid farewell to the last Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev. Putin paid his respects to Gorbachev on Thursday, the 8th of September 2022, but stayed away from Saturday's memorial event with the Kremlin citing his busy schedule. Nor was Gorbachev granted a state funeral like the one held in 2007 for his nemesis Boris Yeltsin, Russia's first post-Soviet president and the man who named Putin as his successor. Former Chinese President Jiang Zemin died of leukemia and multiple organ failure in his home city of Shanghai on November the 30th at the age of 96. Born in July 1926, Jiang began his working life as deputy chief mechanic at the #1 car plant in Changchun in China's northeast, before being plucked from obscurity to head the Communist Party after the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989. People across China, Hong Kong, and Macau mourned the loss of their late leader.
to express their reverence and deep condolences for Comrade Chiang from the Home Party, the entire military, and the Chinese people of all ethnic groups. Flags were erected at half-mast at Tiananmen, Shanghamen, the Great Hall of People, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Beijing, as well as the liaison office of the Central People's Government in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, the liaison office of the Central People's Government in Macau, SAR, and Chinese embassies and consulates abroad.
The longest reigning British monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, died on Friday, the 8th of September 2022, at the age of 96. Her passing left such a deep sorrow for the British people and for the Commonwealth around the globe.
Queen Elizabeth II, Britain's longest reigning monarch, the nation's figurehead and a towering presence on the world stage for 7 decades, died peacefully at her home in Scotland on September the 8th, aged 96. The Queen had been suffering from what Buckingham Palace had called episodic mobility problems since the end of last year, forcing her to withdraw from nearly all her public engagements. Her husband of 73 years, Prince Philip, died in 2021. The Queen's last public duty came only on September the 6th when she appointed Liz Truss as Prime Minister, the 15th of her reign. World leaders also paid tribute to Queen Elizabeth, while ordinary people in Britain and around the globe paid their last respects to the Queen.
We'll be back with more interesting stories and reviews camping such a magnificent year. So stay with us right here in 2022 in Review International Highlights. The moment Will Smith slapped the comedian Chris Rock on the stage of Oscars this year has gained attractions across the globe. However, it should not distract the public's attention towards the real achievement and historical moments of Oscars 2022. In the meantime, in the music business, the Grammys this year was held 1 month later than the initial schedules due to the Omicron outbreak in the United States. However, it was such a celebratory moment and with such a fanfare celebrating all of the music industries in the world. Well, there's good and there's bad, despite all of the controversies of 2022. And here are some of the most interesting stories throughout the year.
Smith slapped Rock's face after the comedian made a joke about his wife, Jada Pinkett Smith's bald head. Pinkett Smith suffers from alopecia, an autoimmune skin disease that can cause hair loss on the scalp. Later that night, Smith won the Academy Award for Best Actor category for his performance as Serena and Venus Williams' father, Richard Williams in King Richard. The actor has publicly apologized twice for the incident and resigned from the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences for his actions. The Academy bars Smith from all of its events, condemning unacceptable and harmful behavior on stage. The Grammy Academy has selected winners for 86 categories to be presented at the 64th Annual Grammy Awards. Yet, for many reasons, a significant number of winners were absent to claim their trophies in person. Singer and songwriter Jean-Baptiste took home 5 awards, including Album of the Year, We Are. On the other hand, R&B group Silk Sonic walked away with 4 trophies, with their song Leave the Door Open. The duo won all of the awards it was nominated for: Record of the Year, Song of the Year, Best R&B Performance, and Best R&B Song categories. Foo Fighters drummer Taylor Hawkins, who passed away on March 25, 2022, was remembered via a video tribute ahead of the awards presenting ceremony in memorandum segment. The Grammys went a bit political that evening as Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky
delivered a powerful pre-recorded video message about Ukraine's ongoing war with Russia. In late August 2022, a male and female twin giant pandas were born in a breeding center in Shanxi province of China. The newborn cubs are the second set of twins from mom Chin Chin, which previously gave birth to 2 females in 2020. Earlier in August, the center also welcomed a pair of twins, which were delivered by a female panda, Yong Yong. It is reported that the population of captive giant pandas around the world has reached 673, nearly double that of 10 years ago. In 2021, Chinese officials have announced that as the total panda population in the wild had surpassed 1,800, giant pandas were no longer considered an endangered species.
And that concludes 2022 in review, international highlights. Here's to hoping a better and more prosperous world of 2023. I'm Rahmat Idris. Thanks for watching. See you next year.